Welcome to everyone, the audience, the panelists. It's an exciting topic. So just a few words to set up the topic, and then really most of the talking should be done by the panelists, really. So the context is that we're, at least the way we see it, we are in the midst of a transformative time. The changes that have happened for consumers, the way businesses operate, the economics of it, the technologies that have enabled them, in the last 8 to 10 years is faster and has been more than the changes that have happened over the last centuries, I would imagine. The consumers are shopping in a very different environment, and their expectations are very different. In fact, before the session, a bunch of us were talking about how both the employees, the customers, the ecosystem has actually changed. And it's not an emerging trend, it's mainstream now. And that, I think, is a very big realization that's important for all of us as business leaders. A couple of data points I just want to start with, which we published in a report last year, published by Bain Company. We have about 825 plus million plus internet users in the country. Average data usage is 20 GB plus per month. That's what the consumers are going through in their life. We have 180 million unique shoppers. 25% of them, on an average, are engaging online every month. And that's really across platforms. So that's the ecosystem in which we are operating in. And it's a demographic trend. It's a democratic trend. 1 in 3 shoppers are actually belonging to the low and middle income groups. 99% of PIN codes ordered something from e-retail last year. 3 in 5 shoppers are from tier 2 cities or smaller, and 1 in 3 shoppers are less than 25 years of age. So that's really the context. Now, but with that, the discussion, I had thought of introducing the panel, but that's been done already. So with that, maybe I'll get to the questions. And perhaps, Shivani, to start with for you, and then would request all the panelists to jump in with their views. So the first one, Shivani, is really on customer expectations. Like I said, there's been some fantastic innovation over the years on products, services, business models. Of course, like the businesses run by all of you. And therefore, the customers of today are spoiled for choice. They've also climbed the learning curve of shifting their behaviors. So in that context, what are the most significant shifts you've seen? And also, therefore, what are at par experiences that customers are expecting? And therefore, what would be a differentiated experience? So over to you.
Thank you, Ravi, and thank you everyone, for hearing all of us today. So I, just for context, I run a fashion business. We have 2 brands, FabAlley and Indya, and we're a truly kind of omni-channel business. We have, a lot of online presence, and I hope a lot of ladies here, would be consumers. And we have, lots of stores across the country and also international, for both, the US, Malaysia, other parts of the world. So for us, when this topic was sent, I think it was very interesting because truly, as Ravi was saying, we are in this ecosystem going through probably one of the most transformational times in terms of what customers expect from us today. And I'd like to split this between 4 things, starting with the product, the brand that we're all building here, the experience, and the channel, which is, broadly distribution. And starting with the product, really, till about 8-10 years back, I think a lot of it was about, either you go to a shop, you like, you see 10 products, you go with your family, typically try on 2 products. And I think that's how probably all of us would have grown up, spent 20-30 years. That was the historical shopping experience. Pick up that product, you'll typically be buying maybe 7-8, fashion garments in a year. All of that now in the last maybe 5 years or so has seen a huge shift. Today, there is the whole concept on the product side of the products being endless, right? Historically, we were saying that let's go to one shop, maybe see 100, 200, 500, 1,000 styles at most. Today, fundamentally, women and men both, we're saying that, there's no limit. There's no limit on the supply side. You can go on any fashion app. You go on our website. You're seeing thousands of products. daily new products, and all of this has happened only because technology today can enable us to say that there are no limitations of space fundamentally, right, in fashion now. So we are actually saying that the experience that today as a customer that you have with us is that you could be in any part of the world. Your tastes, preferences, the kind of things that you want could be very different, and at one place, by putting 100 filters, you will be able to see exactly what you want, to the extent that today there is so much personalization that if you've gone on our website or any other website today on fashion or any of the large players, whatever you've bought once or whatever you've seen once is what you will, more and more of that, and things that are actually attributed to that you will see. Now this level of personalization is really unheard of, has historically been unheard of. So I think that's a huge shift, and that is the first fundamental customer expectation today from a product perspective, to say that I want to be able to, see what it is that I want, yet for it to be endless, for me to be able to make a choice. So there is absolutely no limit on the supply today. We are actually saying that it is a very customer first experience, where customers, if you're a customer, you'll be able to, we as as brands need to be able to give you exactly whatever it is that you are looking for. And everything from customization, so we're able to today say that somebody sitting in the US can actually tell us that these are the 5 traits or attributes that I want, and we will be able to show them 50, 80, 100 products just by virtue of them filling a simple form, from based on our technology, that this is the best fit for you. If you want it for a wedding, you want it for XYZ occasion, this is the best fit for you. So I think just the first fundamental shift is broadly in terms of the product, that what is it, while the experience, the product experience was so standardized till maybe just 5-6 years back, today it's so personalized, and that difference from standardization to personalization, I think, is probably the first huge shift that the ecosystem has seen. Moving on to the brand side, again, from a fashion perspective, I think brands today, and even from a non-fashion perspective, are going to be built only digitally. You could be selling online, you could be selling offline, you could be selling in Kirana stores. I think the customers are going to experience you, the customers are going to discover you online, and that, at least, as a new age brand, is very clear, in the way we're looking at brands. So a lot of our entire journey has been built online, whether it's through stories, through content, and also brands can be real, right? Like, so I started my career with levers, I was with HUL. And it used to take us, like, at least, for brands to be built, it used to take 5, 8, 10 years, with a lot of TV, a lot of ATL, hoardings, there were multiple kind of, that was how brands have been built historically. Today, like in the new age world, just using like social channels, if you have strong content and you have a story behind your brand, you can build a brand in 2 years, 3 years. And there's a huge difference in terms of the money that you need. For, again, historically, it was almost impossible. There were incumbents and there were these huge companies, and, new age brands could not even think of competing with them, couldn't even think of getting a share. And today, I think many of us here have built large businesses which are competing with the largest companies, not just in the country, but even in the world. And I think this was, again, possible only because today it's possible to build brands digitally, and it was historically never possible to do that. And hence the capital required today to build a large business or to build a brand is very different from what it was. And I think, like I said, this ecosystem has probably only been built in the last 3-4 years. It's a fantastic time to be building something in India today, given the ecosystem is so evolved. And just moving to channel and experience now, again, from a channel perspective, I think a lot of us talk, like when we look at Omni, I think the first definition fundamentally is it online, is it offline, what percent is online, etc. And I think, for me as a founder, all of these are just channels of distribution, right? And so if a consumer is shopping from us today, they're shopping from us online, they're going to our website, they're also going to a store, they're also going to a large format store. So customers are not thinking, is this an Omni brand, is this an online brand? This is, as the ecosystem, we're defining brands. And that differentiation or that probably language will not exist, because brands have to be built at every touch point where the customer is. From a technology perspective, like if you look at online, for example, today, you can go on our website, you can get the delivery in the store, you can go to the store, you can see thousands of products on screens, they're on iPads there. So there is actually no difference. So there is no difference between what is online, what is offline. I think for every brand, whether it's, at some point they will need to look at every channel as a point of sale and every channel as a place where the customer is shopping from. It doesn't matter whether it's online or offline. And again, I think from an experience perspective, today's customers are, we were just discussing, they are actually looking, experience has become top notch, right? Like from a delivery perspective, if we are able to deliver our products in 24 hours versus 4 days, the minute you change just that simple tab on the website, there's almost a 15 to 18% difference in sales. Clothes are not something unlike grocery, and many people talk about that you need the same day or in the next 30 minutes or the next 1 hour, you can wait for clothes, right? But the experience has become at a level where customers are actually saying that if I don't get it in 24 hours, I don't want it. So just fundamentally, the kind of experience that we're talking about today, the standards are so high, but I think because the ecosystem is being built in a way, that is something that's a huge change that we're seeing across the board. Post-delivery service, right? If somebody writes to us on saying that I didn't like the product or the fit is not great or any of those things, within 2 hours they expect a reply or maybe even less today. And again, all of those things, historically, what would happen? You don't like a product, you go back to the shop may or may not return it. It's a really broken experience. But today's expectations are that, we are like the brands, the service providers are going to be able to fulfill those needs in a few minutes. So I think those are some of the things that's the shift that we see.
Thanks, Shivani. Very interesting. I think the broadest two takeaways for me are consumers and customers both are becoming more demanding, not because they are irrational, but because we have created services, products and business models that are able to actually even make them realize that they can actually expect an infinite range within 24 hours delivery, great customer experience. So that's one. Second is that there are the historical legacy way of thinking about physical versus digital is legacy, right? It's just one combination of channels, and how do you use physical and digital across all the touch points to create great experience. So thank you, Shivani. Sandeep, perhaps you next. You are running a very interesting mothership of a whole lot of different categories, businesses, omni-channel, B2C, B2B, just a combination of a whole lot of different things. And so while Shivani went deep into fashion, you perhaps have a wider view, and that straddles across B2B, B2C, and different kinds of customer occasions as well. So how would you like to compare, contrast, or build upon what Shivani shared?
No, absolutely. I think Shivani gave a very comprehensive account of how the landscape is evolving. So I wouldn't have much to add, but because you added the nuance, I do have something to say. So how this, so the way I think about consumer, right, like at least in my mindset, consumers are not individuals anymore for me, right? They are households. So imagine a household, there is a 55-year-old head of the family, there is a teenager, there is a toddler, etc., right? The 60-year-old may prefer walking in and experiencing a product and buying it. The teenager might be technologically savvy, would want to prefer going online, looking at selection across multiple apps, and then make a purchase decision. He or she has the patience to receive the product, return it if he or she does not like, etc., right? So the way we are thinking, right, at GeoMart is to try and target the household, right? They want to purchase something, it is up to them. They can go get the exact same product offline, exact same product online, depends on who's available and who takes the responsibility to shop something for the household, right? We are trying to make it as seamless. For me, what's becoming more and more important, right, the nuance of across categories is, it's important in an omni-channel strategy to ensure that the experience is exactly the same, whether you walk into a physical store or you are trying to purchase it online, right? That could be the selection range that you are making available. That could be the quality of selection products that you are making available. Pricing, coupons, offers, everything should exactly be the same, right? Otherwise, it's going to give a very distorted perception, right? So I think that becomes very, very important. You've spoken about B2B. I think that's a great area for us, right? If you look at the Indian landscape, almost 30% of the country's GDP is driven by small and medium businesses, MSMEs, right? There's been B2B happening for the longest period. Consumers have been MSMEs, while the producers and suppliers have been the large conglomerates. That's fast changing. If you look at what Shivani has mentioned, right? Brands taking it from smallest of the towns and cities and trying to reach customers, consumers everywhere. So that B2B has now become a multi-channel relationship. So there is a business selling to a business, a conglomerate selling to a business, and a business selling to a consumer. It is made so easy because of e-commerce, because of tech, right? For example, you asked about what we are doing. We are rapidly trying to get towards a phase where we are able to build a B2B marketplace, right? So right now what happens is you can indent an order and purchase online. You have India Marche, you have Udans of the world. We're trying to create a B2B marketplace, a business being able to buy from a business, right? So that's something that we are working towards, and at some point we want to take it global also. So these are a few things which come to my mind. And the other piece I'd like to add before I hand over is the landscape as how it has evolved over the last couple of years, right? 2 to 3 years. Pre-COVID, the offline was growing at a steady state. Online was growing at a much faster rate, right? There were significant investments done in technology by large companies. Amazon, Flipkart acquired customers. Then there were investments done by companies like Reliance Jio getting internet across the country. During pandemic, that helped. So everybody had fast internet access, and there were e-commerce companies able to deliver products, and the online purchases grew, offline stuttered, right, for about a 2-year period. In the last 1 year, because I have the vantage point being inside an organization which has both online and offline channels, I have that vantage point, and what we've observed is the growth rates have come back to an unprecedented level across both online and offline. So if you are thinking that the era of offline is over and customers are going to move more and more to online, that is not true, right? The data suggests we expect that by 2027, the e-commerce penetration. E-commerce is not just people consuming data via internet, but people actually making transactions, spending money and making transactions online. That is going to grow to about 10.7% by 2027, which is going to double where we are currently. We are around 5%. At the same time, the offline growth is also expected to grow. The overall retail itself is going to grow 3x between now and 2030. And that cannot happen only online, because online is less than 5% currently. Overall retail is going to grow 3 times between now and 2030, whereas the online penetration is going to double. So there is plenty of opportunity to penetrate both online and offline. And that's exactly why for every company or a brand, being omni-channel, being present offline and online becomes important. I'll round off by saying, you asked about what we are doing at JioMart Reliance. A lot of folks know that we made investments. We've acquired companies like Zivame, Urban Ladder, which were traditionally online only. They started their business in an online model. But if you observe what's happened in the last 2 years, all of them now have an offline store. Multiple offline stores across the country, right? So we believe in a complete omni-channel strategy, and our decisions, our investments are in that direction.
Thanks, Sandeep. This is actually resonates very strongly, because I think the 3 takeaways that I have, in addition to other things that I've absorbed, but I'll not repeat. The first one is the importance of consistent experience. So there are promises we are making. Of course, those promises are better than what used to be made earlier, but just making sure that we deliver to those promises repeatedly and consistently. So that was one. The second was a very interesting angle where you said that the consumers have benefited, but the next wave, and that's already starting, perhaps you are participating in it, there are others as well, of digitizing and getting the benefits of digital to MSMEs and actually democratize participation in the business activities for a wider range of sellers and manufacturers. And the third one, which was resonated very strongly, I think Shivani also spoke about it, offline is not going anywhere, right? But just thinking about offline separately and online separately is history. It's really about thinking about it together, and that together there will be 3x of what they are today. Role that digital will play will keep increasing faster than it has, and that's really the third takeaway. So thank you, very interesting. Now, Kaivalya, I'll probably jump to you on the next question. You are running a very, very interesting business and single-handedly responsible for spoiling my kids. But for those who don't know in the audience, Kaivalya is the co-founder and CTO for Zepto, and therefore making promises to households of delivering something, the moment they think about it. So, Kaivalya, your views on the question, builds or contrasts?
Sure. Firstly, thanks a lot for having me here. I think on the point of customer expectations, I think Jeff Bezos said this in like 1999 or 2001 or something, that there are three fundamental truths for all customers of Amazon or e-commerce, which is that customers are always going to want a wider assortment at better prices at faster delivery, right? And he said that 20 years ago, and that's true today. It'll be true 50 years from now, right? And I think that's largely the game that we're playing, right? And for the categories that we operate in, so we started with grocery and now are expanding that very widely into all sorts of stuff, right? Everything from beauty and makeup to electronics to soft toys to, Diwali poker sets were flying off the shelves on Diwali, for example, last year. And I think that the number of categories in the assortment will only grow from there. And I think for specifically the categories that we operate in, we experimented a lot before starting the business and settled on this sort of 10-minute, time frame, because it's just an order of magnitude faster, than anything else that was available online. And that's, I think, what's led to the scale that we've been able to get to, is just that order of magnitude difference. I think if it's, if you're just competing slightly on prices or slightly on assortment, I think it's very difficult to, compete, and build a business very quickly. But order of magnitude or step jump differences are sort of what allowed us to get to where we got to. And so, I think that's sort of how we think about it, right? It's just those three things. There's a fourth one that's pretty important also, that Jeff Bezos didn't say then, but we sort of realize is pretty critical, which is quality, right? And for that, that means two things for us. I think one, so Shivani already talked about the post-order delivery experience and so on. It also means, for us, fruits and vegetables is pretty much our largest category by far, and quality there is like do or die. It's the most difficult category to build trust in, and the easiest category to lose trust in. Right? You get rotten tomatoes once, you're never going to order again. And so, quality is the fourth one that sort of matters. And I think customer expectations are always going to get more and more intense, on all four of these parameters. And I think every category is a little bit different. So, for example, today, fashion maybe 24 hours is the expectation, whereas for grocery maybe it's 10 minutes. I feel like that will also start converging at some point. I don't know when, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. But I do also foresee a future when I need a new T-shirt and I don't want to wait for a day, right? And maybe it's not 10 minutes, sure, but it's probably still an order of magnitude faster than 24 hours. And so I think, over time, all these categories will converge. Maybe some super large categories like furniture or a TV will take a little bit longer to converge, but I think at some point all of these will converge, and because those three sort of fundamental truths I don't think will change.
Thanks, Kaivalya. And what I said earlier was partly in jest, but quite serious implications that the next generation is actually growing up in an environment. So the next cohort of shoppers that are entering the universe every year is actually entering with all of these expectations are base expectations. And it's not about exceeding those base expectations, it's about meeting those base expectations. And the rate at which you've scaled it the last 12 months kind of indicates unmet need that has suddenly being met, and therefore customers didn't know that they could actually get something in 10 minutes by ordering through the phone. But now they've discovered it, right?
I think on that point, I was just discussing this with somebody last night, right? And when we started the business, I think the question that everybody had was, who the hell needs 10-minute delivery? Like, I can wait, right? And I think that's the same thing, 24 hours versus 4 days. But if you ask people, right, like before we started, when we asked people, do you need deliveries in 10 minutes, everyone will say, no, it's fine, I can wait, right? But what people say and how they behave are often very different. I think Henry Ford said this before he invented the car, and was that if I'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said they wanted faster horses, right? And I think it's something similar here.
Very interesting, Kaivalya. So on this topic, Amit, probably I'll go to you next, and after that, Sudhakar, I'll come to you on the next question as an implication of this. So Amit, you run a very interesting and a fantastic business. I'm a frequent shopper from your stores. But my association with La Marche historically was that of a fantastic grocery store. But you have also transformed the business over the last few years, and a very different starting point from the other panelists that just spoke before you. So what would be your perspectives on customer expectations, sure, and what's power and what's different?
Firstly, I hope we still continue to be a fantastic grocery store even after the transformation, and that's not changed. Right. So, see, from our standpoint, I think we have a slightly different perspective here. Okay. Our view is that from an omni-channel standpoint, I think the view that the grocery industry has taken is a bit myopic, and I don't think that we've done full justice to the consumers till now. We've only restricted it to a fulfillment concept, right? What I mean by a fulfillment concept, and there is nothing taking away from the fact that it does take a lot of effort to ensure the assortment pricing and the speed, but I don't think the consumer really shops that way, right? And for us, the actual definition of omni-channel would be if we are able to get the same experience to the consumer, either he shops offline or online, right? Now, let me give you an example here that let's say if somebody walks into our stores, right? They are picking up an avocado or a banana as an example. They have a need state in mind, right? Either they want a ripe avocado or an unripe one, or an unripe banana, a ripe banana or an overripe banana for a need state of making a smoothie or a shake or having it as a fruit or just waiting for it for a few days to ripen up, right? Now, with that, in the store, they are able to touch and feel the product, pick up basis what they need, right? Now when they go online, nobody is really capturing the need state of the consumer, and nobody is really asking us that, the avocado that you need, should it be ripe or not, right? Even if we start capturing it, then how do we actually translate it at the back end, and we are able to actually leverage AI to be able to map it to the consumer need state that has been identified and then pass it on to the consumer, do it over and over again. So that is actually transcending the offline experience to online, right? Now let me give you another example of the same consumer who's there. He wants to look at the pricing online before he shops offline. We're not really giving any choices to him in terms of any information. Or if he sees, La Marche's 20,000 SKUs in our stores, if they want more information about a product, that's not available, right? So how do we actually bridge these gaps and ensure that it doesn't really matter where the consumer is, but they get the same kind of experience? Because till the time we are not able to do that, the consumer will end up, buying partly from online, partly from offline, deciding upon, the channel partner at that point in time. And what will eventually end up doing is that will just eat up into the transaction efficiencies of online and offline players, right? Nobody is solving for it holistically. And I think that's the real challenge. We've seen it at La Marche as a simple example in one of the stores that we've just launched. The category of cheese as an example, many people keep on asking what's the right pairing with wine, right? We tried out ChatGPT, it's giving up the right answers. We've put that up as a support there, right? For some of our categories, we've started showing the online price comparison in some of the sections so that we are able to communicate to the consumer that, yes, this is the best pricing that you're getting, and you don't really need to go back and check. And then, if you're going back and checking, you'll end up buying from elsewhere. So the holistic experience being omni-channel will be the more differentiated experience. I do appreciate the fact that, yes, fulfillment will be, will be there for a while, but if businesses have to grow and, have better transaction efficiencies, it will need to be a complete experience.
Thanks, Amit. In fact, what you said reminded me of some of the work we've been doing, which when you think about consumers' memory structures, right? As brands, we have to create memory structures that help them think about what are the experiences, what comes to mind when you think about a brand or a product or a service. Now, creating memory structures that last require engaging in as many of the senses as you can simultaneously, and then creating memorable experience when you engage with that brand. The biggest advantage an omni-channel experience has is that you're engaging with multiple senses in that moment where the consumer is experiencing the brand. So the benefit you have is that you have a physical asset which is engaging across the senses. Right? There's visual, there's skin, you can touch and feel, you are hearing, you're smelling. And that really is a very memorable event, and carrying that experience onto the digital points of contact with the consumer and making sure that it's consistent is a very strong reinforcing mechanism. And that's why a lot of digital first brands still see the physical touch points being important, because then they are much more impactful in creating memory structures that last. So,
the only difference, Ravi, there is that once you've created the memory structure, you don't really want the consumer to go back, check the pricing, and then buy it from elsewhere, right? So might as well just initiate the purchase therein.
No, absolutely. Operational implications are many, but I think I just got reminded of that, so I thought I'd share that insight, because this debate about digital first brands and digital only businesses, how important is it to actually have physical touch points and working on physical touch points or owning the experience of those touch points, is a debate, and there's obviously trade-offs in economics and investments and stuff. So, but I think that's one big takeaway I've had. So, and like I said, as a customer, I have actually experienced consistency of your business on that. So with that, Sudhakar, perhaps I'll come to you next as a serial entrepreneur who's actually built lots of very interesting businesses and now in the business of digitizing B2B commerce as one part of what you're doing. Maybe you could start with your views on the technology part of enabling all the experiences and enabling the business models that we've spoken about. So what are the most important evolutions or tools that you think has actually enabled delivering all of these experiences? And any thoughts on what's more hyped versus what's actually truly the technology that's leading to all of this differentiation?
Now, the whole challenge is how do technology catch up with the consumer expectations? When you talk about consumer expectations, they have changed dramatically and they are spoiled for choice, right? If you think about 1990s, when you order a BSNL telephone connection, you get it in 3 months. 3 months flat, you are delighted. You are elated, right? And you try and talk to a kid, my own kids who are 8 years old. If their internet connection dropped their Wi-Fi connection dropped for a minute or two, then they say this service is not working, Dad. Let's go and change it, right? That's how the expectations have changed or evolved. Probably we're all spoiled them for choice. We've all have their expectations skyrocketing there. So how does technology catch up with this whole consumer expectations is a big challenge that we are all trying to grapple with, right? And I think we are going to a stage where predictive analytics are going to be like the next mantra there. Instead of delivering their groceries in 10 minutes time, do we anticipate their change, saying that do we need rice probably in 10 minutes? Can we deliver it? Is probably the next evolution there. And looking at the way ChatGPT or the AI revolution is happening there, I don't think the day is too far when you have this predictive analytics or the AI giving you the anticipations and recommendations there. Now, is it intrusive? Is it invading into privacy? Is a different ball game altogether. We are, I think we are seeing the early signs of it, and only time will tell whether it is intrusive or a convenience, right? And this whole, when you talk about the omni-channel kind of a story there, during the pandemic, most of the shoppers are shopping online, and because going to a physical store is not a option anymore. So we all felt that stores are a thing of the past. They become like dinosaurs. That once upon a time there used to be a physical store kind of a thing there, which proved to be a misnomer, or it proved to be wrong there, because people came out shopping, because shopping again is not just it's kind of a lifestyle for them. You go out to shop, it's an experience for them, right? So both of them will coexist. It's not online versus offline. Both of them will coexist, right? When we are launching our brands in multiple formats, right? So we've decided, are we going to be a digital first brand? Are we going to be a offline brand? That's not a question anymore. You are a brand. It doesn't matter whether you're a D2C brand or a physical first brand. You have to be available where the consumer wants you to consume. You can't say that, oh, I'm a digital first brand, so order me online. Or you're going to say, okay, I'm only available at a physical store. You go to a nearest store and get it anymore. I think that discussion is over. It's well and truly buried, right? So as a brand, for us, we are a brand. People ask me this question, are you a D2C brand? I say, I'm just a brand. Now, D2C is an overhyped thing. And if any brand has to survive, they have to be in both the formats. It's not this versus this, right? So the whole hype of online versus offline, they have to coexist. And if we were to survive and if we were to thrive, so we have to be available at the place where consumer wants us to be there. He's not going to wait for us to make available at a store or an online format or so. I think these trends are driving the technology forward. So are we completely there? Not yet. But are we going to be there? Yes.
Thanks, Sudhakar. And the one way in which I interpret what you just said is that, of course, predictive analytics, AI, machine learning is, I guess, a part of a lot of the algorithms in any case now. But the fact that your tech stack and architecture needs to be in a way that it's, physical, digital, all touch points, everything is actually integrated into one, brain in some ways. And that's really, and everything that you're building upon is not just, these are the digital transactions, these are the physical transactions, and it's one experience, one brand, and it's not a digital first brand or a physical first brand. It's just omni-channel, and therefore has implications on how you actually build your tech stack.
Yeah. And for brands like us, it's a huge challenge because we don't own the entire consumer experience there. We are relying on a JioMart or a Zepto or a Reliance Retail or a physical store to actually deliver that, right? So it's quite a challenge for us because how do you have a uniform front, whether you buy it on Blinkit or Zepto or a JioMart or at a store there, at a Spencer's retail store there, that's quite a challenge there. How do you put up a uniform front there? How do I make it available across the stores, whether it is convenient for them or not? It's a huge challenge for us.
Understood. I think after this meeting we should talk.
I would love to hear the answers because I don't have answers for all, so I would love to have your experience on that.
Plus, many of your stakeholders are here. On that note, Kaivalya, I'll jump to you. I think you are delivering a very different experience. Like we said, you almost created a market in some ways, made people realize that there is a unmet need that you can serve. I'm sure there is a huge story behind the scenes on how you actually unlocked that business model and delivered to that. So please speak to us.
Yeah, sure. Before I jump into that, just one of the things that you mentioned, Sudhakar, on the predictive analytics front. So it's something that we recently started baking into our recommendations. So let's say, for example, atta, right? Let's say for a household or for a customer, they're buying atta once every 3 weeks. Let's say that's the refill rate, and it's the same 5 kilo or 10 kilo atta. If they've just bought it today, let's say today is Saturday, it doesn't make sense to recommend it again to them on tomorrow or day after, especially because the same way with offline retail, real estate for us on the app is something that's a super precious commodity. And so, baking that refill rate logic in and then only recommending it about 3 weeks again, 3 weeks after the last purchase is something that we started doing. It's working pretty well. But yeah, coming to the question on how do we leverage technology to make this happen? I think there are probably about 100 small things, but I'll talk maybe about 2 or 3 large ones. I think one of the first things we realized that would be pretty crucial to being able to deliver this quickly is the locations of our dark stores or our delivery hubs, right? Because we call it network design, which is basically just deciding, okay, if we want to launch in Paschim Vihar in Delhi, where should the dark store be, right? And over time, obviously that process evolved, but today there is a tremendous amount of data that goes into that. Everything from the population density to the number of Domino's restaurants and Starbucks, cafes that are there, and so on. And so that's one, major one, and that sort of journey of deciding where to, because it has implications on customer experience because it directly impacts how quickly you deliver, and also has implications on cost because Obviously, if you open a dark store every 500 meters, you deliver to everybody in 5 minutes. But that's very expensive, right? And so it's that balance that you have to find there. The second thing, so that the first is network design. The second thing is across the board on our supply chain, right? Everything from, so today we've built a whole bunch of technology on the pharma side, right? So I think something like 70% GMV contributing SKUs that are sold on Zepto are procured directly from farms, right? And all of the packaging and all of the quality control and all of that is managed internally. And there's a tremendous amount of technology that has to go into that to make that happen. A lot of the a big focus around I think all startups in the last year and a half has been unit economics and the sustainability of their business models and so on. And I think there for us, we started investing in that very early. And so in our fulfillment centers, how do we just maximize productivity of people, experimenting with automation there, basic, not robotics in the sense that what you might imagine in like a movie, but basic things like, for example, if there is a packer who has to pick something up from a shelf, rather than telling them to go to aisle A and rack number 3, a whole bunch of lights that are there on every shelf. So the light lights up when they have to go and pick something up. So there's less cognitive load on the packer, right? So there's like 100 small things like that all sort of add up to this. Those are some of the things on the fulfillment side. Then also there's like replenishment, deciding which truck should I use, a Tata 407 or Tata Ace to replenish a dark store, right? So the space is utilized well. There's like 100 small things like that on the supply chain side. And on the customer facing side, right? I think as you get into more and more categories, search, discovery, all of these problems just become infinitely harder, which is where recommendations and making the buying journey a little bit easier for customers is sort of the main focus there. And that's what our sort of product and technology teams are sort of working on. But yeah, those are some. There's a lot, right? I don't want to get into all of them, but those are 2 or 3 of the big ones.
Thanks, Kaivalya. I got reminded of, many years back as a consultant, we used to do a lot of route to market work for clients. These are where the retailers are. This is what the beat for your salesman should be, right? And that was a static answer. I mean, I cannot imagine a static answer like that being relevant in today's age, because the demand patterns vary. The retailer universe, I mean, the Kirana universe hasn't changed much, but the relative materiality of categories, the competitive intensity, the share of wallet of online versus offline, that's changing across micro markets in a way that the salesman productivity is actually, you have to be a lot more dynamic. And just connecting the dots on your operational and supply chain related insights are actually impacting traditional companies as well quite significantly. And I also got reminded of a constant stress between consumers seeking simplicity in UI, UX and recommendations versus the millions of designs that may be available, and therefore how do you select which are the 5 to present? How do you select which are the 2 SKUs to recommend? Because real estate is limited, attention spans are fewer.
I think one of the things also, right, I mean, Kaivalya actually encapsulated the online scenario pretty well. I was just having an offline chat with an ex-colleague, right? And I was just amazed the way data is being used to make decisions in an offline world. So you were sharing, you were just chatting about how's it going at Reliance, and I was telling a bunch of stuff, and he said, yes, I'm aware. One of the data points that we use to put a pizza store is whether there is a smart point there. So you guys have done the research, you know how many households are there and what's the traffic coming. So if I'm able to put a pizza store in a kilometer radius, then I'm sorted. I don't have to do my own research. So that's a recommendation.
Before we start, I think even before we thought of the name and we were starting to build things out, we had hired a couple of people early on. And I remember one of them saying, like, he was still on his notice period, and he just said, we were trying to figure out this whole network design thing, and he just said, look, Domino's has figured out this 30-minute thing. Probably takes them like 10 minutes to make the pizza, 10-15 minutes. Why don't you just find a space as close to a Domino's restaurant as possible?
On a lighter note, if one guy makes a mistake, then
yeah.
But okay, on that note, I think that it's very related to the topic we were just discussing on technology about organization capabilities, right? There is an implication of all of this stuff that's changing with the consumers, all the technology enablement that is either happening or is at a minimum available to be taken up. So Amit, perhaps you could start with how do you think about the capabilities and operating model of your organization in a way to be able to meet and serve this changing context. And then after Amit would request anyone, the others in the panel to step in with their views.
Ravi, I think the major change for us has been, and for me as an individual, I've realized that it's no longer that I'm managing one company, but a network of multiple companies, each of whom are at a different level in the maturity curve, and I might exercise a different degree of control over them, right? Just to elucidate that further, we are looking at it across 4 axes, so to say. The first one for us is the external ecosystem, right? So be it for players like us, be it a Zomato or a Swiggy or a Dunzo or even a Blinkit right now, right? How do we actually partner with those guys and try and reach out to more and more consumers? But again, the way they interact with their merchants is different. Their catalogs are different, their inventory models are different, and it obviously has a ripple effect on the store teams who are now expected to do the fulfillment apart from just the management of the store, right? Second is that clearly, given that you mentioned the transformation, we've obviously launched our own digital commerce assets, which again needs a separate lens of management and a separate team focus. Third is how do we leverage more and more digital into our offline processes or offline sales? And that's something that has developed or evolved over the last few years. It has significantly now started helping us with the sales of our products. The fourth and perhaps the most important one for us is that we've stopped looking at digital as a channel in isolation. We've more or less adopted that as a way of life. So be it aspects like payroll, HRMS, audits, trainings, theft preventions, all of that has gotten digital, right? So from that standpoint, I think the major lag that actually comes in is that we've realized with experience that the employee evolves at a slightly lesser pace than the consumer, right? And as as an organization or as an individual, if we are able to minimize that lag, that is what really sets out the winners from the laggards.
What resonated most, Amit, when you said that was actually 2 things. One is, and we see that across the clients we work with, there are people, employees and stakeholders, so suppliers, with their own core capabilities and strengths, which may not be across the board that you require as a business. So and they operate at different speeds. Historically, the speed of operating, they go deep in certain areas, work at a certain RPM, and expecting the entire organization to run at the same RPM and therefore at the same speed of change is unfair and unreal and can actually be disruptive, because in some functions and some people and some roles you need predictability and stability. And therefore, how do you manage this portfolio of capabilities, experiences, and call it RPM, call it heart rate, call it rate of change, in a way that's actually serving the business is a very important skill to develop as an organization and as a leader.
Which is true, because one of the examples that I keep citing, and that's really about leading with empathy as well, that just because the world changed upside down in a matter of days doesn't really mean that the people were able to upskill themselves on their own, right? So from a time when, as an offline retailer, all we needed to do was to ensure great experience and the assortment and life was sorted, suddenly, we had a scenario wherein if you just look at our store teams as on today, right, compared to the pre-COVID days, they are managing a Zomato. It means different inventory levels and a different catalog. It means a different screen on their laptop now, right? Swiggy has a similar set, Dunzo has a similar set, our online commerce has a separate set, our conversational commerce has a separate set. Consumers have started to order more and more on home delivery and more on WhatsApp. So imagine the kind of complexity at that level, and the kind of upskilling that somebody is expected to do almost overnight. That's
so that we're able to create a uniform experience to customers. I think these two things become very, very critical: empowering people and ensuring significant investment in technology.
Very insightful, Sandeep. The concept of empowering, but not empowering without, decision rules in some ways, enabled by technology, so that your boundary conditions of empowerment. Right? Otherwise, empowerment can go haywire.
Absolutely, exactly, and we've seen that happen. So, within the overall Reliance Smart Store network, we've seen examples of a couple of stores operating significantly profitable, whereas other stores not. So we obviously created a mechanism where we are transferring learnings of a successfully operating store, templatizing them and sharing it with the rest of the store. So that's already on. So you're right. Any empowerment without the right kind of audit can go haywires.
Building the capabilities in the organization is the biggest challenge, especially in our organization, where we're building multiple brands. We have a specialty tea and coffee brand called Brew and Blaze. Our home decor brand is called Be Bliss, and we are into other categories as well. And especially we are launching simultaneously about 21 countries. It's a huge challenge there, because working in an organization like us needs a lot of cross-domain expertise. Do we hire from FMCG, or do you hire from technology? Do you hire from distribution? Is quite a challenge there, and especially when we are competing with lots of companies which are leaders in their own space. Right? It's quite a challenge. If you ask me, that is the first and foremost important thing that keeps me awake at nights. Right? So I wish I had an answer for that.
Don't we all? Well, thanks, Sudhakar. And Shivani, perhaps I'll go to you next. We have about 5 minutes left for this panel. Okay, about a minute, but let's take 5. Shivani, perhaps just as a closing remark, what would be one or two pieces of advice that you would give? You've gone through a very interesting journey, have pivoted, have experimented, have scaled up two very interesting brands. So any pieces of advice or learnings that you would like to share, and then would request the rest of the panelists also to jump in.
Yeah, I think in the interest of time, to keep it short, I think the one thing that I would tell everybody is, in the last 10 years since I started, there's been a huge shift in terms of expectations, in terms of channels, in terms of customers, what they expect, etc. And I think the only thing that's really helped me and would kind of suggest to everybody is being flexible in terms of the business. As Ravi was again saying, there are so many pivots that are done, whether it's with respect to the product, whether it's back to how Amit was mentioning, from offline to kind of being digital, and then working with marketplaces and so on and so forth. So I would just say that in this journey, as anybody is building a business, there's going to be, one can think that these are the 5 things that I've plotted, I know this is going to work, the next 3 years are going to look exactly as per this business plan and this sheet and so on and so forth. It's not going to happen. There are going to be so many external changes that are going to happen all the time, especially once businesses start scaling up. So I just feel for not just the promoter or the CEO, but the entire kind of management team, to be super entrepreneurial, to be super flexible, to understand the market, and to be okay to make changes and to learn along the way. I think that is probably the one thing that everybody needs if you want to build a business.
Yeah, I can go next. I think I'll talk about 2 things. Number 1 is for every brand which is trying to build, every organization which is trying to grow, I think focus on customer experience. I've learned that during my time at Amazon, again at Reliance. Both organizations, great organizations, extreme focus on customer experience. So for a digital first, like you said, that's the nuance you added. For a digital first brand, there are 2 opportunities for you to ensure proper customer experience. One is the app experience, right? App or the interface that you're providing your customer, right? How do you make it extremely seamless, simple, smooth for them to transact? Make it intuitive, right? That's one opportunity, and keep working on it. And how do you do that? Map the entire customer journey, right? Don't try and give feature piecemeal. Try and map the entire journey and build it so that customers have an intuitive experience. The second aspect is the delivery experience, right? How do you make it as smooth as possible, right? Whether it's 10 minutes, whether it's 3 hours, whether it is next day, how do you ensure it is seamless, right? That's why what we track is two metrics. One is order to promise, one is order to delivery, right? What have you promised, and are you ensuring that you are meeting the promise, irrespective of the timeline? If you say 10 minutes, do it in 10 minutes. If you say next day, do it in next day, right? These are the two things from a customer experience perspective. Second, and the most important thing that I've been learning, I've been at Reliance for 2 years, and what I've learned is ensure that you're building profitable businesses, right? You don't know when there is going to be a drought. So trying to build businesses which can scale profitability is the way to go. Watch out for that early on so that you're not under extreme pressure in a few years. So these are the two advice that I have. Personal advice again, it's out there to take or reject, but that's what I think is going to make companies thrive.
That's what we need from the panel. I think your collective experience is, I think, more valuable than than you would like to admit, because I think it's just the last 10 years of shaping the ecosystem has literally been done, by people on that. Kaivalya, would you like to go next?
Yeah. So I haven't been doing this for a very long time, so I don't have a lot of advice and a lot of gyan. But maybe in like 5-10 years, whenever I'm back here. Yeah. But the last 18 months have been a lot of fun. I think one thing that we learned, or we were told when we went through Y Combinator, but started seeing firsthand over the last maybe 6 months or so, is that this is more specific to sort of entrepreneurs or people starting businesses, founders, is that just making sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, and the motivation is sort of intrinsic and not extrinsic is pretty important, because I think last 8-10 years have pretty much been, there's been a lot of money being thrown around and zero interest rates, and it's been very easy to raise money, and a lot of businesses were created, and it was very sexy to start a business, and so a lot of people got into that for the reason that it was a sexy thing to do, whereas now the last year or so has been a slightly different story, and I've seen a lot of people deal with that in a very, it's been difficult to deal with that, right? If they're not in it for the right reasons, and the motivation was more extrinsic rather than intrinsic, creating customer value or whatever else, right? And so that would be the one thing I think that I've seen. But yeah, I think maybe in a couple of years, once I've accumulated a little bit more gyan, I'll be able to share more.
Next year, GBS, we'll ask this question again. Sudhakar, and then Amit, just closing remarks, I guess.
I think stick to the fundamentals is one thing that I all want you to do it, because irrespective of what business you are in, whether you are in retail or online retail or offline retail, the fundamentals of the business still remain the same. And there is a lot of euphoria that is going around, and don't get carried away and don't get swayed by the euphoria around you. Stick to your fundamentals and you'll do well.
Thanks, Sudhakar.
So always take the consumer forward approach rather than a channel forward approach. And do remember that Indians are emotional beings, so they'll forgive human behavior, but they might not forget technical glitches, so choose your tech partners carefully.
Thank you. This has been a fantastic conversation.